Welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast, the podcast that gives you immediate actions you can take to start seeing life-shifting results now. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Achieve Results Now podcast. This is Mark Cardone.
And Theron Feidt.
We are talking about purpose today.
Yes.
What a big, heavy, word that is, purpose. I feel like, when we hear that word, we think of finding our purpose, life's purpose, all of these very heavy undertones come with that word.
And I think it's kind of thrust upon us oftentimes, especially as you're ending your teenage years. What are you going to do for a living? What's your purpose? And how often do we find that we don't find it? And I think it is heavy, but I don't think it needs to be heavy. And we're going to talk about, I think, purpose in a little bit different way, and I think it's going to put your mind at ease a little bit.
Well, and I think Steve Jobs, right? You can always connect the dots looking back. It's hard to connect them looking forward, but now at the age I'm at, I look back at my my life and I say, wow, my purpose has changed quite a few times.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting about that is you can change your purpose without necessarily changing your values, without changing your your core beliefs and things. As much as you need to always be looking at those things and kind of examining what those are. I think you can change your purpose because all our purpose really is the reason we're doing the things, the things that we're doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the big thing that early on it seems like I was like, okay, this is my purpose, this is what I need to do, and like you said, it can change and adjust. But if you start with principles, you start with values, and something that we've done on different podcasts, and maybe we do it again, is list all the value, what's valuable to you, what are your top three things, all of those help give you a direction anyways. But we're going to be talking about how to find your purpose. But the big thing is, just like we said, just to reiterate, it's going to change. It depends on where you are in your life. If you're younger, I think your purpose is much different than once you start having a family, and then once that family grows up and they have their own family, now your purpose changes. And I think allowing yourself to adjust and make changes to that purpose is really a key to life. Yeah,
it is. And one of those things I hear so often is people say, "I just don't feel like I know what I'm doing. I don't I don't feel that sense of purpose." And I think we're going to address that a little bit because I think purpose is also something that it's there. Right.
Yeah.
It's even if you can't see it, it's underlining a lot of your life, in your day to day. So I think this is going to be a great podcast because it's really going to hone in. We're honing in on how to not only have it, but to identify it and to make it stronger and to keep it going.
Right. Yep. And so we're going to, of course, give you 3 tips and 3 action steps to take to find your purpose and or strengthen your purpose.
Yeah.
So the first one we're going to talk about, and I think this is something that people might not realize this is how to find it. They think it's once you have a purpose, then you do this, where really what you need to do is you do it first, and then you find your purpose oftentimes. And what that is connection with people and service.
Yeah.
So thinking about people, how can you connect better? That's one-on-one, just make a connection to, and I'm not necessarily talking about strangers and increasing your network, although that, of course, that's important, especially if you're in business, you want to increase your network. But how do you make a stronger connection with your family, with your friends, with people that you're around a lot? And then in there, how can you serve them?
Yeah.
How can you help them on a daily basis?
I think this is a great one because I think we all have that need to fill a space in the world, right?
Right.
To be, Schwarzenegger's new book, Be Useful, right? We all have that internal need to feel like we're not just here for no reason, like we're useful. And I think one of the easiest and quickest ways to find, where you can be useful is just to have those deep conversations with people, where you're actually connecting and you're figuring out where do I fit here? How can I, like you said, be of service, add value? We're heading into the end of the year. People talk all the time about volunteerism. I think, thinking in your head about what kind of groups would I like to be involved in, what kind of, and I always talk to people about this because they think, well, geez, that sounds like more stuff to do, and I'm already very busy.
Yeah.
And if you're busy but you're not filling that purpose or finding that purpose, there's definitely things you should be cutting out of your schedule to make that a
Right.
priority. So
Right.
I think this is just a great thing, and it's easy to do. It's just reaching out to people and having conversations.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is. And I like what you said is having a deeper conversation, and really trying to, and of course you can't do that with everybody. And there's going to be certain people that you're going to connect with than others, right? But I think it's important that at least you get to the service part. How can you serve? How can you help people? And you may know something that somebody else doesn't, that's easy for you to do, and you can help them, and it's really not that difficult. But for them, it was like, oh my God, that was huge. I mean, that really made a huge difference. And you don't know, I mean, just being kind to people, the kind words, all of those things are important. Giving them just like, you can do it, giving them a little bit of a boost,
Yeah.
all of that is part of making that connection.
No, and it sounds like a big thing, but it's really not. And
Yeah.
when, like, I know a lot of people, in their very close relationships, right? Maybe their kids, their spouses, their parents, that they've forgotten to do the easiest thing, which is just to sit down and have actual talk,
Right.
with those people that we love. Because if you start there, then it becomes easier to work. Like you said, I don't think you should be going up to strangers and asking them,
Right.
how can I serve you? Right. That would be
Yeah.
super weird. Definitely
Yeah.
take karate if that's going to be your approach.
Yeah.
But I think just having those conversations, because we get so caught up, with the familiarity of the people that we're close
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
that I think we just forget to actually put the phone down,
Yeah.
and talk to your spouse like like it's your first date again.
Right.
Be interested, and
Yeah.
you will find a lot more ways to serve that way.
Yeah. Instead of blaming the other person, saying, well, if they were this, if they were different, what, and you can't change anybody. I mean, you can influence people, you can't really change them. But what can you do
Yeah.
differently? And what can you do to get the conversation going, be in a better mood? When you
Hmm.
enter the room, does it brighten up, or
Yeah.
does it brighten up when you leave? You know,
Right.
the attitude that you bring to other people, and I think what you said as far as the people around you and the close people around you, don't forget about them. You know, so often I see people are helping everybody else outside of their family, but their family's falling apart.
Yeah.
Don't forget about don't forget about the people that have been around you.
Yeah. And it's one of those things you just have to schedule and make time for it. But I think it's so important. So, making a connection and that leading to service is just such a good way to find your purpose.
Yep,
Number two is probably the most I think this is the most difficult one, right?
certainly can be.
And
Yep,
this is and you wrote down, be mindful, not mindless, which
right.
I think is just profound to a lot of people.
Yeah, and we all go through. We have habits, and we develop habits, and we get into these routines, and we just kind of go through. And it's important that we're being conscious of how we are in front of people. How's our face? Do we smile enough? Um, how is our greeting? Do we sound grumpy? Do we sound? All of those things are important. Um, but also the connection is kind of part of the first one of connection is also part of the second one, is making great moments.
Yeah.
You know, and the mindfulness, being mindful, will help you be in the moment more.
I mean, there's nothing in front of you. There's nothing behind you. Like, all we have is the cup of coffee I'm drinking right now, the podcast I'm
Yeah.
on right now. And I think
Right.
this is
Right.
this is so hard for people to grasp, right?
Yeah.
Because we have that to-do list in our head. We have that regret
Mm-hmm.
list in our head.
Yep.
We have all of this stuff where we're thinking, should have done this, gotta do this. And we forget to just, you know, look at the sky, enjoy a
Yeah.
cup of coffee, be at the table with the people you're with,
Right.
which kind of goes back to making that connection. But I think there's so much power in just being able to like
Hmm.
taste your
Yeah,
coffee,
yeah,
right? Like mind blowing.
yeah. It is. It is, and it's the moments with other people too. You know,
Yeah,
of course, you see a great sunrise, but it's always better when it's with somebody else.
for sure.
So making those moments, and that's where that being mindful and really not thinking of what's next, what am I going to do next, and if you're an achiever like a lot of people are listening to this, that can be difficult. You have to really put yourself and be present,
Yeah,
because oftentimes I know I'm in the habit of what do I need to do next? What's the future? Let's go. All right, I did this. Now it's on to the next thing.
yeah,
And when you're dealing with people, especially your immediate family, you have to not do that. And you have to slow down and say, okay, let's enjoy being together.
yeah, yeah. And I think one of the worst things you can do is look at your watch when you're trying to be present, right?
Right, right,
Because people who live 5 minutes ahead, of everybody else. We all know those people, and sometimes we are those people,
right,
where we're in the moment, but we're
right.
mentally we're somewhere else.
Mhm.
And I think that level of mindfulness to be able to just sit and be where you are, right? Because that's where your purpose is, right? At that moment, your purpose is where you're sitting. And I
Right.
think, as it should be giving, way to your greater purpose, but just finding that level of presence and building that ability to just be there is really powerful.
Yeah, and being out of the robot mode and being mindless, I
Yeah.
think that is how you find your purpose. Because
Yeah.
you're thinking, you're in thought, you're thinking about where you're at.
Mhm.
You're feeling the emotions with other people that are around you, and all that makes a difference. So this can also definitely help you find your purpose.
Yep. And then the last one, which I think is probably one of the easiest ones, but kind of the hardest to nail down, is our habits.
Right.
And it's about generating our purpose with the actions that we take.
Right. Right. It's so easy to say this is what I'm going to do. It's much harder to actually do it.
Hmm.
And we all have people in our lives that are talkers.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then you look, and a week later they haven't done anything. A year later they haven't done anything. 10 years later they're in the same spot. So we don't want to be that. We want to make sure that we're the people of action. That if we're going to say we're going to do something, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
But also looking at your habits. Are your habits aligned with your values and your principles? And then how can they lead you towards your purpose? Well, I think if you're doing the first two things that we talked about, you're connecting with people, you're helping people, you're being mindful in the moment, and then your habits and actions align to all that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, and the word doing is so it's so interesting because
Yeah.
I think the words people don't say out loud, right? Which I know, like I've said to myself in the past, I'm sure other people say it, but when you say to yourself, why the hell am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why am I still doing this? Why am
Right.
and terrible self-talk, right? Terrible self-talk. We
Right.
should not be doing that to our minds, but
Right.
when you catch yourself saying that, we should be saying, that's a great question.
Right.
Why am I
Right.
doing this? Right. And if you hate your job, say, as an example,
Mm-hmm.
right, and you find yourself going to work saying, why am I doing this? That's where you got to plug in that gratitude and say, why are you doing this?
Right.
Because it feeds my kids. It puts a roof on the head. It's
Mm-hmm.
me doing the things.
Mm-hmm.
That's not saying you should stay in a bad job,
Right.
but your life is going to be infinitely better if you can answer that question, why am I doing this?
Right.
Why you're doing this.
Yep.
So I think
Exactly.
that's a great practice to get into.
I think maybe when people hear this is like, how is this? All of these things are going to help you find your purpose.
Right.
Because it seems just too simple. But
Yeah.
but I think oftentimes we make things too difficult. If we're anxious about something, we're anxious about something because in our head we're making it worse than it actually is, and our thoughts about it are making us anxious, making us nervous. And in our head, the fear grows, right? And
Yeah.
and we can do the same thing about something that's positive too, but it's difficult to, my purpose, oh, that's so difficult, I got to write all these things down, I got to spend hours thinking about what my purpose is,
Yeah.
when really it's much more simpler than that. You kind of just find it.
Yeah.
You kind of just discover it by doing these things.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily going to hit you and you're going to write it down and that's it. And like we said earlier in the beginning, it's going to change too. Having kids versus when they're older, your purpose does change and shift.
Yeah.
Not being married versus being married, having a career versus retired, your purpose changes, and you need to allow it to change, because how often do we hear people that retire, then all of a sudden they die just a few years later?
Yeah.
And it isn't because they got sick, it's because they lost their purpose.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to change your purpose.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think purpose is always running in the background.
Yeah.
And I think, as achievers, right, I think we are working to serve, the best possible purpose we can. And if you are, I'm going to go back to your mindful, not mindless.
Yeah.
A lot of times you can see that that's changing. You can see that, hey, like I just got married. Now my purpose is building this. I just had kids. They're now my purpose. My kids went to college. Now I have a different purpose of reconnecting with my spouse.
Yep, exactly.
So, I think it's interesting how, we almost put too much weight, like going back to the way we started on this heavy thing that we have to have, when really it's running in the background, and it's just about finding it and honing in on it. So, so let's review those steps.
Okay.
I think this is a great help for people.
Yes, for sure. All right. So number one is make a connection and serve people. So connect with people and think of how you can serve them.
Yeah. Number two, presence, right? Like, be mindful, not mindless. Really make sure that you are in the seat you're sitting in, right? Don't live 5 minutes ahead of everybody else.
Right. Yep. And then the last one is your habits and your actions. Make sure they're aligned with the things that you want, but also think about what you're doing with them, and making sure that they're moving in the direction that you want.
Absolutely. That wraps up this episode of the Achieve Results Now podcast on purpose. Share this with somebody. I'm sure someone will get some stuff out of this, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening. Hop over to our website at www.achieveresultsnow.com to get your free copy of our book, Ignite Results, 4 specific daily actions to help you achieve results now. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Achieve Results Now. Thanks for listening, commenting, and subscribing. Now get out there and achieve results now.